Hi, everyone. Previously, we talked about the magic of capitalism. We talked about some of the the basic machinery that moves capitalism forward. And one of the things that we arrived at was that one of the central things that capitalism wants to do is accumulate profits, is the extraction of profits. And we talked about the extraction of profits having to do with the difference between paying for labor power as opposed to labor. And one of the conclusions that we arrived at is if we want to look at if we want to calculate the rate of profit, what we could do is we could calculate it based off of dividing the amount of surplus value over constant capital plus variable capital. In other words, this is a different way of saying you divide the amount of profits that you made and you divide it over constant capital, which is another way of saying overhead cost, plus variable capital, which is another way of saying wages. So to put this in other words, what that means is if we want to increase the rate of profit, and that's the name of the game, you want to continuously make more profits. So if you want to increase the rate of profits, we'll do a shorthand. What you want to do is you either want to increase the amount of profits that you make, and you do that by lowering the denominator. So you constantly want to increase profits, and you want to decrease constant capital and variable capital. You want to decrease the amount of overhead costs that you have and wages. And really, you want to get at decreasing the wages. So the more you could decrease wages, the more you could increase profits. So that the rate of profits is a function of how much money you're spending on wages. So if this is the name of the game for capitalism is constantly to not only be profitable, but to increase the rate of profit so that I want to be more profitable today than I was at the same time last year. So you're always comparing this year to the last year in terms of how much more profits that you made. Like if you listen to any kind of business news, they compare, for example, what Apple's income was or how much it generated in terms of profits this quarter versus the same time last quarter, or at the how much profit it generated last quarter. It's not looking at is Apple profitable. It is profitable, but it wants to know if it's more profitable than last year. So you're constantly trying to increase the rate of profit. Within this kind of the operation of capitalism, as it attempts to do this, there's three structural contradictions, or there's three tensions that keep emerging over and over and over again. These three tensions are tied to the very structure of capitalism. And so then that means the system, capitalists within the system constantly have to figure out how do you manage these crises that keep popping up. So I want to spend today, or this video, looking at what those crises are. So we're going to deal with three, right? So let's deal with the first one. And the first one emerges naturally out of the very operation of the business as it moves forward. So let's start off with looking at a business climate in which we have low unemployment and generally a high demand for labor. So if there is low unemployment, so most people are employed and businesses are looking for workers, there is a high demand for workers. If we are under this condition, what follows from that is that workers' leverage increases. So if workers are negotiating with their employers, the leverage that they have in that negotiation increases because there is high demand for labor and there isn't a lot of workers out there. So in this context, then what the workers could do is they could negotiate for increases in their wages. So V goes up in this case, or wages increase. And as wages increase, if we go back to our equation here, so if V is going up, that means then naturally that's our profits are going down. So in this case, S, or our profits, go down. So our wages go up, our profits are going down, and if that happens, then what we get is as S goes down, then investments stop or they shift elsewhere. Why would I invest in this sector if the profits that I could generate are going down? The rate of the profits are going down. So as a result of this kind of movement of investments out from the sector, what you get is stagnation or decline. The economy kind of stagnates, it stays where it's at, it doesn't go up, or the rate of profit doesn't go up, or you start to see a decline. So if there is a decline or stagnation, what are the businesses going to do? Well, the businesses are going to start laying off workers. There's not a lot of investors. There's stagnation in the business. Let's lay off some workers. So if you start to lay off workers, then what happens to this leverage that they used to have before? Well, then the workers' leverage declines, right? You don't have as much leverage to negotiate with your employer. And if your leverage declines, then you don't have the ability to negotiate for higher wages. So your wages are going to start to go down. As wages go down, what goes up? Right? If the wages are going down, then your profits are going to start to go up in that business in that business for that corporation or for that business. So now that profits are starting to go up again, what you start to see is interest in investments. And so then you start to see that investments are attracted again. And you start to see the flow of investments in. And then as investments start to come in, then you could start to hire more and more people, and then you could get back to even this condition where you had low unemployment and high demand for labor. But this means that there is constantly this movement up and down in the business cycle. Well, if this is happening, and in this moment in time, you have decline, economic decline. And in this decline, this is an opportunity for workers to organize. There is a crisis, sometimes of legitimacy here. There could be increased agitation. And then on this side, in the upswing, then you could have growth. Well, for growth, this means the re-legitimation of the system. So you could have a process of re-legitimation, where the employers or the capitalists could turn back and say, hey, look, all of you people who are agitating when the economy went down, you just need to have patience. As you have, and if you have patience long enough, you'll see that we'll put our money back eventually as your pay goes down, and then the economy will rebound again, right? So that as your wages go down, we'll start doing better, and everybody will start doing better. So this is one kind of a moment of crisis, this natural up and down in the business cycle. There is another kind of structural contradiction or structural tension. And that is, so let's go back to our attempt or our need to increase surplus value or to increase profits. So if we want to increase our profits, we need to then invest One way we could do this is investing in the machinery of production. In other words, what we're attempting to do is, can we invest in research and development? Can we invest in ways of figuring out how we are making that commodity that we're making in order to sell, and how can we make it in a much more productive fashion? So we want to increase the productivity of production. Basically, we want the worker to be able to produce more goods at the same time that they used to. So within the same time period that they were working, can we get them to produce more products? So that could mean, if you made 10 different commodities within an hour, can we get the same type of hour, at the same time, can we produce more? So instead of 10, producing 20 of those things within an hour. So one of the ways you could do that is by upgrading the very mechanisms, the tools, the machines, the know-how of how you make those materials. So you invest, you try to come up with better ways, better machines, better tools to make those things, with the hope that now the worker has some better tools to use, and because they have better tools to use, they could be more productive, produce more goods. So if you are able to increase this productivity, this is great. The result is going to be increased profits in the short run. So in the short run, you're able to generate new amounts of money, increase profits, because you figured out a new way of new machines, new tools that could be used to make the process of production more efficient. The problem becomes, though, on the long run, the machines, the tools that you've developed, well, other people are going to be able to use those same tools and machines eventually. And so then over the long run, they're able to use the same tools as you can, and so the productivity becomes the same all across the board. And so then you're back to the point of attempting to control or to repress wages. So you're going to, at this point, once you've kind of become more and more productive, how do you decrease the price of wages? The problem becomes, though, that wages, or V, cannot be reduced to zero. Which means that over the long run, there is a diminishing rate of profits. In other words, so you want to increase your profits, you invest in the machinery of production, so you're able to become more productive. By becoming more productive, you're able to get the worker you're paying the worker the same amount, they're working the same hours, but they're producing more goods. At some point over the long run, this kind of stops, or like everybody else has the same types of machines, so you come back to, okay, how do I reduce wages? The problem with wages is you cannot reduce it beyond zero. At that point, you're asking someone to work for free, right? So you're not going to be able to ask someone to work for free unless you force them. At that point, that's kind of like close to being slavery. So you cannot go under zero. So there's a limit to how much you could repress the price of wages. So that means that over the long run, there is going to be, no matter what you do, there is a diminishing, that rate of profits cannot keep going up. At some point, it's going to plateau. And it's going to diminish. You cannot keep increasing it. So this becomes the second kind of problem of capitalism. Then there is a third problem. And in order to understand the third problem, we need to imagine 2 points, 2 time periods. The first time period is the period of time when you are producing a good. So the moment of production. The second time period is the moment of consumption. So when we are in the process of producing a good, and we're all here, we're capitalists, At this point, what we want to do in order to generate more profits is we want to decrease wages, as we've been saying. So we want to decrease the amount of money that we're paying the workers. And the lower we could do that, the more profits we could make. And this isn't just one capitalist, just me. We all are in the same game, right? You can't hate the player, you gotta hate the game. The name of the game, the reason why we're in this game is to generate profits. So it's not just me, it's me and everybody around me. All of us capitalists who all have owned the means of production. We all own these factories. And we all have these workers. We all are going to try to figure out a way to diminish the wages of our workers because then we're able to generate more profits. So at the moment of production, we're all interested in lowering the wages. In the moment of consumption, we have a different issue. We need people with purchasing power to buy our commodities, to buy the stuff that we made. So at the point of consumption, we actually need people who have some money to be able to buy the stuff that we just made. Well, who are these people? Who are these imaginary people that are trying to buy the stuff that we made? Well, they're not imaginary people. They're the same people who were in our factories. So if you take the entire kind of economy, and in the entire economy, at the point of production, all the capitalists are driving wages down, what ends up happening is even though you've created a bunch of goods, even if your goods are really good, you could have the iPhone 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 35, I don't know what number we're at this point. They could be amazing, but if nobody has the money, they're all going to sit in the warehouse. And it doesn't matter what number you're at in the iPhone creation business. They're all going to sit in the warehouse because nobody has the money to buy them. So at that point, then your iPhone isn't worth anything. If you're the producer of the iPhone, if you're Apple, it doesn't matter how good it is, nobody could buy it. It's sitting in the warehouse, thus it might as well be useless. So these 2 points in time are in stark contradiction with each other because at the point of production, your interest is different than in the point of consumption. In the point of consumption, you want people to have money. In the point of production, you might not want them to have that much money. So this presents a problem for capitalism in these 2 moments in time. So here we have 3 different crises. Well, how do you respond to these crises? What are you going to do? And so there's going to be a multitude of different types of responses. So we could generally say some of these responses, there's many, and historically there are some historically specific responses that emerge out of the social struggles between people who are organizing and people who are attempting to counteract that organizing. So it's not like there is a inevitable or one type of way you respond. The responses we've seen historically. But what we could say is usually then capital has responded by moving or shifting the problem. This could be spatially, so you move it like geographically. You could look for untapped resources or spaces. You could also attempt to further innovate the production process. You could innovate in the production process, or you could find new spaces of accumulation. So historically, for example, through processes of colonialism and imperialism, advanced capitalist countries or capitalist countries attempted to shift or move some of the problems that emerge out of these types of crises onto the colonies, onto the third world, onto what's called developing countries. And so then you are able to kind of manage some of these issues. Another thing that you could do is you could, again, innovate in the production process to try to kind of save off some of the problems that you might have. And another thing is to accumulate or find a new space for accumulation or new types of ways in which you could accumulate. So for example, if we are running out of one of the sectors in the economy is not generating as much profits as it used to before, well, maybe we could incorporate something that is outside of the market logic into the market logic. So something that before you couldn't make money out of. So let's say, for example, we're talking about education. If you think of schools, schools are not businesses that generate profits, usually speaking. Let's put aside universities for a second. But schools are not a place in which you generate profits. It's outside of the market logic. It doesn't function based on how much profits that it generates. It has a different goal. And so then you come here, you have already all of the other spaces in which you can make profits are already capped. And so you're like, well, can we turn this operation that's happening, the educational system, and can we maybe bring it within the market logic? Can we somehow figure out a way to make money out of schooling? And so by doing so, you have incorporated a new space into the market logic, into the capitalist logic, and now you could generate profits from it. And so now it's a brand new space for all kinds of new business operations to flood into. So we've seen this over time in different places. And we've seen, again, different examples of colonial and imperial activity that we could get into historically. The other way in which these contradictions sometimes are attempted to be resolved, most of the time they're actually not resolved, but rather just kind of moved around, postponed, taken from here, put somewhere else, because they keep coming back up. These are endemic within the structure of capital. The other way in which you could resolve some of these tensions is when the state enters and starts to regulate some market forces. So for example, you could usually see this here when it comes to production and consumption. So we saw this, for example, after the Great Depression in the United States. This is where the state could come in and say, well, look, capitalist, you are acting in an anarchic fashion. And given the anarchic fashion of capitalism at this point, you're all looking at the short term. So I, as the state, am able to look to the future and see what's going to happen in the future. So based off of that, what I could do is I could come and ask you to give me, I'm going to increase taxes on you, get some money from you, and I'm going to use that money to provide health insurance, retirement for workers in general, to all the population. Now that workers in general have health insurance and they have retirement, the low amount of wages that you give them could actually go much farther. Their purchasing power increases because, in a sense, those workers don't have to put money away in savings for their retirement. They don't have to put money away in their savings for health insurance because they're getting that from me as the government and I'm getting it from you through taxes. But because I'm doing that for them, now they have extra money to be able to buy the stuff that you produced. So this is one way in which the state could come in to help this problem. Another way that the state has helped this problem is by opening up the regulations for finance. And now instead of these consumers instead of you paying these workers more money in order to be able to consume, you just give them credit cards. And so if you give these people credit cards, you don't need to actually give them more wages. They'll just now use credit to buy the stuff that they can't buy before, and they think that they own it, but in reality now they are indebted to the bank, the credit card company that gave them money. And in doing so, now I've created a new market. I've created a new space of accumulation where in the credit card companies, right? So now the financial market is going to balloon because now the financial market has a whole new space to operate, which is giving credit to everyday people to buy stuff that they want and they need because they cannot buy it on their own because their wages are too low. So these are all different ways or mechanisms by which the state has attempted, or companies have attempted, to get around these various crises that are endemic to the structure of capitalism. The structure of capitalism that is, again, built around, the name of the game here is to increase profits. It's not to make profits, it's to increase the profits so that this year I'm making more profits than last year. Last year I made more profits than the year before. Capitalism is like a bicycle. A bicycle needs to keep moving. If you don't keep moving, you're going to fall. Capitalism has to constantly generate more profits than it did before, or else it collapses, right? So you got to know the game to play. Thank you.